Hi, this is MJ at Genshin Support Club, and today I want to share a quick tip for mobile players who may be struggling in timed content like the Spiral Abyss. Before we begin, a little station identification just so there's no confusion around my qualifications as a guide maker. First, a couple of things I'm not. I am not a theorycrafter and I don't pretend to be one. I hope that speaks for itself. I am not an expert gamer. In fact, Genshin Impact is the first game of its kind I've ever played. I am an AR60 endgame player who has been playing Genshin Impact every day on mobile since December of 2020. That's it, that's my qualification. As a streamer who plays on mobile, I often hear complaints from other mobile players about their difficulties in the Spiral Abyss, and my first recommendation to them is to seek out advice from theorycrafters on how to improve their accounts by adjusting their builds and team compositions. But there's another piece of advice that I don't often hear players talking about that can make a significant difference for some mobile players, even after they've built their accounts. So, if you go into the settings for graphics on my device at least, the default is set to high, which includes a lot of features that make the game look pretty, running at 30 frames per second. I don't know if or how much the default settings change from phone to phone, but on my iPhone 12 Pro Max, this is where it would be set if I never changed a thing. After I started playing Genshin, I certainly had heard the term FPS, or frames per second, somewhere or another, but my takeaway from the discussions I saw was that the main purpose of switching to a higher number would be to make the gameplay smoother on the screen, and since my game looked perfectly fine to me, and changing that setting made the temperature of my phone go a bit it didn't seem worth worrying about. But when a theorycrafter mentioned to me that some damage-related actions in Genshin are scaled off of frames, my ears definitely perked up. One example that was provided to me was a Lisa burst, which at normal 30 FPS would tick 27 times, while at 60 FPS it would tick 29 times. I did a little comparison for myself, and sure enough, the tick counts were exactly as described. I could see it, I could count it, there it was. As a non-theorycrafter though, it's hard for me to get a sense of what that really means for damage output, so I decided just to try it out in the Abyss with the teams I wanted to play. The results surprised me, to say the least. So, for the purposes of this video, I ran through just side 1 of the first chamber on the current floor 12, with a team I play often. It's not an especially remarkable team, with only one 5-star character and no 5-star weapons, but these characters are well invested in, and this team typically performs well for me in Abyss. I chose the buff that would not affect my DPS, and I entered the chamber. I'll speed through the actual fight for now because you're going to see it again later, but suffice it to say that by the end of side 1, I only had a minute and 8 seconds left for side 2 in order to get 3 stars. Maybe doable with the right team, but not necessarily a breeze. So I exited Abyss, went back to my graphics setting. Since I can't run the game at 60 FPS without, I first turned all the other graphics to low, then set the FPS to 60. Then I fought the first side again. Same team, same buff. You can see pretty early on that the hit point bar on the perpetual mechanical array is moving faster with my game at 60 FPS. And honestly, you can really feel it when you're playing too. When I first started experimenting with switching to 60 FPS, I thought the difference would be maybe a few seconds here and there, enough to scrape out an extra star if I was really close to making it. But as it turned out, for me anyway, the difference was between a harried fight for stars down to the last second on 30 FPS versus an easy run with plenty of time to spare at 60, which means there's also time to procrastinate to get burst back for the next chamber or to screw up and still finish with full stars, even when a character auto-attacks the wrong enemy or someone accidentally dies to blooms. I honestly discovered I could kind of suck in Abyss sometimes and still get my full stars at 60 FPS. Since I'm out of my depth to try to fully explain this, I've spent some time talking to my most trusted theorycrafters, and I've watched some pretty interesting videos too, discussing the effect different graphics capabilities have on a gamer's performance, and I'll link to these in the description to this video. These videos aren't about Genshin Impact, and they are focused on gameplay rather than damage potential on gaming PCs, and for the most part they're comparing already high frames per second with even higher frames per second, way beyond 60, which at a certain point is not perceptible enough to make a difference to anyone. However, because the difference between 30 and 60 FPS is very clearly noticeable, the experience as a player in my scenario was quite different between the two. I could clearly see that I was doing more damage somehow, but I also consistently felt like I could be a better player with the frame rate boosted to 60, even though I obviously had the same amount of time to play on both runs. It felt like I had more breathing room to react to the enemy's movements and to maneuver more precisely at 60 FPS, and because of that, I was less likely to get knocked back or to miss time an attack. In the runs you're watching here, there was a 14-second difference between the first and second examples, but this was not the only set of runs I did to test out the difference. Because there are so many variables involved, my skill issues, auto attack misfires, tiny variations on where your attack falls within frames, even the RNG involved with this particular boss. It would be difficult, if not impossible, for even a seasoned theorycrafter to estimate precisely how many seconds you might save switching from 30 to 60. So for the purposes of this video, I took the most conservative of my results, which is to say, my best performance at 30 FPS versus my worst at 60. So that 14 seconds was the smallest gap I was able to achieve over multiple sets of runs. Other times, the difference ran up to 30 seconds. 30 seconds saved on just one half of one chamber in Abyss 12. And no matter how many times I ran it, I could never achieve the same result at 30 FPS that I was able to get at 60. I'll probably never switch to these settings for anything outside Abyss. Genshin Impact is a beautiful game, and when I'm in the overworld, I want to enjoy it with the nicest graphics my phone can handle. And I can't promise any of you that your experience with this graphics shift will help you perform the way you want to in Abyss, especially if your account isn't yet fully built to get there. I'll still recommend theorycrafters and guidemakers as your first and best option for improving your account and your Abyss performance. But if you're struggling to clear timed content and your phone is up to the challenge, I absolutely recommend trying this out for yourself. I've heard from several mobile players recently that changing graphics settings changed their whole experience with the game, so it may be worth a shot. That's my tip for you guys today. If you've enjoyed this video or found it useful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel where I've begun a series of guides for mobile Genshin players. If you'd like to watch me play on my own mobile account, I stream Genshin Impact every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at twitch.tv/Genshin Support Club. Thanks and good luck, mobile players. See you next time.